Hello and welcome back to BOSH tutorial video session series. This is Jamil again. Today's video is gonna be the fifth and last video in the development environment setup section. In this video we're gonna have a quick look inside the BOSH VM. We're gonna SSH into it. And the agenda for this video is gonna be, first we're gonna an off-topic subject. We're gonna introduce a new site containing an index for the videos that we have created so far. And in the next session, we're going to SSH into the BOSH VM, explore the BOSH-related processes running on the VM, explore the disks of the BOSH VM, and we're going to also explore the BOSH-related directory structure on the VM. It's going to be a quick look just to get us started and just to break the ice of exactly what's going on inside the BOSH VM. So let's first start with the going to the site that was created. So I created this GitHub repo recently that contains an index for the videos that we create so far, so that you can pick and choose easily which one you want to watch, and each one contains a sentence of what you expect in the video, in addition to the target personas in general for each video. So technically, which persona the video will be more relevant to. And for BOSH personas, they are nicely stated in the BOSH website. There's a link also here on the repo. So if we go there, there's, for example, a release author, deployment author, etc. So you can have a quick look and pick and choose whichever video you want. I'll be updating this list as we go along, so that it will be easy to navigate. So we have finished number 1. And let's get started. We want to SSH into the BOSH VM. So a quick recap. In the previous videos in the development environment setup, we created a BOSH Lite director, and we explained that it's a BOSH VM. Sorry, it's a VirtualBox VM, and we explained in details what does that mean. So today we're gonna SSH into the BOSH VM, that VirtualBox VM, and explore around. We're gonna first explore around the processes running. We're going to also go through the disks attached to the BOSH VM and what do they mean, and we're going to also explore the BOSH related directory structure on the VM. So let's get started. First we need to SSH into the BOSH VM. So if we go straightforward, or like the straightforward way of creating the BOSH director with create env, like the basic one, it will not allow you to easily SSH into the BOSH VM. If possible, I don't think it will even allow you to SSH to the BOSH VM. So what we need to do is we need a way around it. And the way around it, we already did it. I didn't talk about it, but we already did it whenever we created the director. So if we remember in previous videos, whenever we ran the BOSH create env, we include multiple operations files, and a quick recap: operations files are a way to stitch together a manifest to create a BOSH manifest, and we talked about them in detail in the 7th video, which is development setup environment part 3. And if you want to have a quick look first about them. So one of the operations files, the highlighted one here, it's the jumpboxuser.yaml. What does that will do? It's gonna add a job, and by job I mean it's a release job. If you remember also whenever we talked about the BOSH releases, the theoretical overview about the jobs. So it's going to add a specific job, and the whole purpose of that job inside the BOSH VM is to create a user and inject a private key, a public key, so that we can SSH using that user. So it's going to create a user and then add a public key to its profile so that we can SSH to that user. And the way it does it, let's quickly have a quick look at the jumpbox user, and what I'm opening here is the BOSH deployment repo. So, and it's going to be jumpbox.yaml, and you can see here it's using the osconf release. You can have a quick look. It has multiple utility jobs that can be used. And what we care about is the specific user added job. What it's going to do is, as we stated, it's going to inject a user, and the user will be jumpbox. Then we call the jumpbox, and it's going to inject the public key in it. So this public key is automatically generated whenever we did the create env, and the keeper, the private and public key, will end up in the creds.yaml as we have stated before. So if we open the creds.yaml, we're gonna just have this is the jump box, but I'm gonna just take those away. Okay, so it is, as we explained before, it's just a YAML file containing the creds, whatever the create env created, and in specifically we care about is the jumpbox SSH. So this one is the private and public keeper to access for that jumpbox user. So we want to take the private key and SSH to it. We can just quickly copy paste it and then add it to a file and then use it, but let us do it the BOSH way, or the BOSH CLI way. So currently we're in the folder that contains the we can just remove this. We are in a folder that contains the creds.yaml file. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a BOSH command called BOSH interpolate. And BOSH interpolate, did I type it interpolate? And it's not BOSH, it's BOSH. So BOSH interpolate, it allows you to manipulate, or actually to work with the operations files. And what we care about, and plus many other things, but what we care about is an option in it, and it's called path. What it will do is that it's going to extract a value out of a template, which is technically in our case, it's going to be the creds.yaml file. So the way that we're going to do it, and by the way, the BOSH interpolate alias is BOSH int for easiness. So what we need to do is we need to bash path and slash jumpbox underscore SSH. And why I did that is, if we look back into the creds.yaml file, the key that the private key is under, it's called jumpbox SSH underscore SSH. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to say creds.yaml. So what will that do is going to extract that specific anything under the jumpbox SSH key and display it in the standard output. So you can see here we have the private key, public key, and the fingerprint. What we care about actually, but we only care about the private key. So what we're gonna do is, you can navigate this as a tree. So we're gonna say private underscore key. So what's gonna, not G key, and what that will do is that it's gonna extract only the value under the jumpbox SSH slash private key. So let's redirect it to a file, and let's call that file priv for now. And so if we cat priv, we can see the private SSH key. So now before we SSH into the VM, we're gonna chmod 600 so that SSH doesn't yell at us. So we're gonna make it only readable by us, and it's gonna be priv.key. Cool. So what we can see here is the private key that we need to SSH to. Now we need to get the IP of the BOSH VM. You can get that from the command whenever we create the BOSH director. So I think it's going to be here. So the create env command, we have stated the internal IP of the director. So let's go ahead and then copy that URL, that IP, and then we're going to SSH into it using it. So we're going to say BOSH. Let's say BOSH SSH, not BOSH, sorry, it's going to be SSH-I, and then it's going to be private key, and the user, it's going to be it will be called the jumpbox at this, and the reason the user is called the jumpbox is in the jumpbox user.yaml, the user that we have injected right here, the username is jumpbox. So let's go ahead and SSH, and boom, we are inside the BOSH VM. We're SSH into it, and let's say we're gonna say who am I? We're gonna be jumpbox. One thing to mention is that this user that is created by jumpbox, by default, it's gonna be a passwordless sudo user, which means that you can gain sudo access without typing any password. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do sudo su, and we should be root right now. So we are a root user right now. So we're inside the VM, and we're as the root user. Let's go back to our agenda and then see what we're gonna do now. Okay, so the first part after SSHing into the BOSH VM, we need to explore the BOSH related processes running on that VM. And to do that, we need to introduce a command called monet. And monet is the tool that is used in the BOSH stem cells for monitoring the processes for spinning up and monitoring the processes related to BOSH. So you can go. There's no need to go into details in it, but you can Google it. This one, it's easy and proactive monitoring. But what we really care about all of this is that we're gonna use it to list the processes related to BOSH inside the VM. And to do that, we need to do monet summary, and it's gonna list all the processes related to BOSH. And these processes, if you remember, among them is the BOSH director, and which we think about for now as an HTTP server that is that we interact with using the BOSH CLI. So you can see it here, and it's only one of many processes. We will not go into each one of them because it's not the topic of the video, but it will just give you a nice way of displaying or just looking around the processes related to BOSH. So by doing monet summary, you can do that. Now the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna explore the BOSH, the disks that are attached to the BOSH VM. And for that, let's clear it and let's do lsblk. This one is gonna list the block devices, and let's explain the output here. In general, whenever it's your in general, actually all the time for a BOSH VM, you will have 3 disks. First, you'll have the root disk, and this is the partition for it. And then the second disk you're gonna have is, we call it the ephemeral disk, and this disk is used mainly for 2 things. It's used for swap, the memory swap, and it's gonna be used also for it will be mounted, the other partition in it, it's gonna be mounted into a specific directory. It's called var vcap data, and we call it ephemeral disk because everything inside it, BOSH will not guarantee that it's gonna remain there, let's say, at any point of time, let's say after a restart or any. Technically, you should treat all the information there as ephemeral, and all that, and the partition of the second partition of the disk, it will be mounted at var vcap data, and we're gonna explore that var vcap data directory in a bit. And the third disk, which will be mounted at var vcap, or the partition of that disk will be mounted at var vcap store. We call that a persistent disk, and the reason for that is that the BOSH will guarantee that the information that you store in it will be there if you restart the VM, etc., etc. So let's say if you have some database, it needs to persist some files, probably you want to put them here. And we're not going to talk about this. This is an optical drive, which is only because we're using the VirtualBox VM. So a quick recap: we have 3 disks attached, or 3 disks for BOSH. We have the root disk that contains the root partition, and then we have the ephemeral disk that is used for, there's 2 partitions, one for swap and the other one is for it will be mounted at var vcap data, which is ephemeral, and the third one is persistent disk, and the partition for it will be mounted, there will be only one partition that will be mounted in var vcap store. So this is a quick look at the disks attached to a BOSH VM. Those disks or this layout will be almost the same as any VM that will be created by BOSH later on, and we're gonna explain it later, but it's gonna be almost the same in the structure. So we covered now the disks of the BOSH VM. I'm going quickly through them because I don't want to dive deeper. Just this video is a quick overview of the actual BOSH VM. And the third section, what we're going to talk about, is the BOSH related structure. So for BOSH, you will find almost every related BOSH almost every related BOSH software under var vcap folder. So you can see here under var vcap, there's multiple folders, and those are all related to BOSH. So um, we're gonna go quickly through each one of them. What does it mean? So in each one of them, let's say you can see there's this BOSH director, by BOSH directory here. This contains related files, binaries, etc. that are related to the agent running on this VM. In this specific scenario, the agent is not running because it's a BOSH Lite. We disable it for specific reasons. But if we want to have a look at it, let's say if we're going to ll BOSH, it contains technically the agent settings and related files and binaries. So, so this is the BOSH directory, and it's under var vcap. Now there's data, and as we have stated, data is the second partition of the ephemeral disk will be located, will be mounted into var vcap data. So if we go to data, and then if we list, this contains all, let's say, the related ephemeral data that processes related to BOSH care about. So for example, here, if we, let's say, list the director, and it contains a temp folder, so it contains some temporary folders that director process is running on, that director processes uses. So this is the var vcap data, and let's go one back up, and then so we're going to talk about the instance. This one contains some metadata or about the current instance of BOSH. We will not go into details because it's more relevant whenever you are navigating or whenever you are looking into a BOSH created VM that, let's say, through a deployment. So we will not care too much about it for now. Now, and the other one, we're going to talk about the jobs directory. Those jobs are nothing but this directory contains the jobs that are related to the BOSH director. So plus other stuff that we added during the create env. So if we remember, whenever we talked about the BOSH release, it has multiple jobs, including the BOSH directors plus many things. Whenever we create a BOSH VM, these jobs, they will be listed inside this folder. And for example, it contains the director, blob store. And if you remember, if we do, let's say, a monet summary, for example, you can see blob store, there's another blob store, and then for example, you can see there's Postgres, you have Postgres here. So those are the jobs. So this is where the jobs related to BOSH director are located. And you can see here, actually, let's do a quick LL for jobs. You can see those are sim-linked. This job, each one of them, they are sim-linked to a specific directory in var vcap data jobs. This is where, because everything related to the BOSH in the jobs will be sim-linked to these directories. Just a quick, nice piece of info to know. And let's actually see what is left here. So we talked about jobs. I will skip the micro BOSH because there's no need for this video to cover it. Monet is monet related. We can have a quick look. Monet related files, which you also it's a very rarely actually you will care about it. We'll talk about the packages, and as we have mentioned here, let's do LL packages. Those are the packages for the job that we included in our create. So sorry, in the create env, all the releases that we have included, and the jobs related to them, they contain packages. So those packages will be added right here, and any dependencies they have. So this is where it's going to be located. And let's go back now to what is left. We are left now with the store. So this is the persistent storage, as we have mentioned before. And let's say if we do, this is where all technically the binaries that we have uploaded. For example, here, if we're going to go to store and then blob store, and sorry, I messed it up. So this is where the all the jobs, if they need to store any persistent data, they will end up here. So for example, if let's go to the Postgres. So if we go to the Postgres, so I'm gonna not to the blob store. There's nothing in the blob store because we didn't deploy anything yet. But let's go actually to the Postgres here. There should be something. So this is where the Postgres database will store its files. This is very useful for the store directory because we know that the persistent disk partition that was mounted on the var vcap store is here, so that let's say if we need to update the BOSH VM, what we can do is what's going to happen is that the old VM is going to go away, but before we're going to unattach the disk, detach the disk, the persistent disk, it will contain all the information still on it, and then we're going to get rid of the old VM, create a new VM, and then reattach the disk and mount it at the same point, so that whenever we start the new Postgres, let's say it has been updated, it's going to just get the old files so that we will not lose any data of our deployments. So that's good to know. So I'm going to go one up, one more time. So let's list. So this is the store, and sys, this is contain mainly the logs of the processes. So for example, and you can see that it's a symlink for also the data, which is the ephemeral disk. So we're going to go here, and then we're going to change directory to this guy. And let's say it's going to contain a var vcap, or actually let me go up and then change to sys, it will be easier. So we're going to do change to log, and then we're going to see that this contains also a list of folders and contains usually the logs. The processes are a convention for the processes run by BOSH to log in this specific folder. So for example, if we go to the BOSH director, or actually if we list the BOSH director, we can see there's multiple logs here. So this is the a quick look at inside the BOSH directory var vcap directory, and which is related to BOSH. This is where BOSH stores all of its related binaries and configurations. So to end, just to recap in this video, what we talked about is we explored the BOSH processes through Monet. We also talked about the disks of the BOSH VM. We talked about the ephemeral, the root disk, and the persistent disk, and we saw that lsplk. We saw that the ephemeral disk is one of the partition is mounted at var vcap data. That's where all the jobs packages are stored, and the BOSH and the persistent disk, the partition will be mounted on var vcap store, and that's where the jobs store the data that they need to keep from after an update, for example, or they can't lose, more or less, for example, database files. Also, and in the third point, we talked about the directory structure of the BOSH VM, and specifically under the var, which is under the list var vcap, and where we talked about the almost each one of them, the one that are relevant, and what does it mean. Thank you very much, and for following along in this video. And if you have any questions, please post it. You can open an issue if you want on this BOSH tutorial videos repo, or if you want to add a comment on YouTube, please feel free to do that. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.